Welcome to Mythic Mundi. Today we journey to the land of ice and gods, to Asgard, the great fortress of the Aesir. Its story is one of power, of magic, and of cosmic stakes. But the story of its mightiest wall is not one of glorious battle. Instead, it's a tale of a desperate bargain, a moment of profound panic, and one of the most bizarre and defining exploits of the most unpredictable god of all, Loki. This is the story of how the God of Mischief, in an act of sheer desperation, transformed his very nature, lured away a magical beast, and in the process became the mother to Odin's legendary eight-legged steed. In the dawn of the realms, long after the cosmic giant Ymir had fallen and the worlds were shaped from his remains, the gods of Asgard faced a pressing concern. Their celestial home, a shining citadel in the sky, was a beacon of order. But order invites chaos. Asgard was vulnerable. The Aesir, led by Odin the All-Father, were powerful. They had magic, wisdom, and warriors, but they were not invincible, and their greatest fear was the ever-present threat of the Jotnar, the giants from Jotunheim. These were not simple-minded brutes. The giants were primal forces of nature, ancient and powerful, and they coveted the order and beauty the gods had built. More than that, they coveted the gods' treasures, chief among them the goddess Freyja. Freyja was not merely a goddess of beauty and love. She was a master of the magical arts known as Scyther, a Vanir goddess who had brought her knowledge to the Aesir, and she was the embodiment of life and fertility. To lose her would be an unthinkable blow. The gods also treasured the very lights of the cosmos, the sun, known as Sol, and the moon, known as Mani. These celestial bodies, personified and precious, were essential to the life of all 9 realms. A decision was made. Asgard must be fortified. A wall was needed, one so high and so strong that no giant could ever breach it. As if summoned by their very need, a stranger arrived in Asgard. He was a builder, a master mason, and he came with an audacious proposal. He claimed he could build the gods a fortress wall, stronger and higher than any in existence, in just 3 seasons' time. The gods, gathered in council, were intrigued but suspicious. Such a feat seemed impossible. What was his price? The builder's gaze was steady. His price was steep. Perhaps the steepest ever demanded. He asked for 3 things: the hand of the goddess Freyja in marriage, and possession of the sun and the moon. The hall fell silent. Freyja herself was outraged. The other gods were aghast. To lose the sun and moon would plunge the worlds into eternal darkness. To give away Freyja was a betrayal of one of their own. Thor, the god of thunder, was away in the east, dealing with giants in his usual direct manner. Had he been present, the builder would likely have received a swift and fatal answer from the hammer Mjolnir. But the other gods, led by Odin, were more inclined to negotiation. They were trapped. They needed the wall. This is where Loki, the silver-tongued god of mischief, stepped in. Loki, a giant by birth, but a blood brother to Odin, existed in the space between chaos and order. He saw the gods' dilemma, and, as he so often did, proposed a clever solution. "Let us accept his offer," Loki suggested, a glint in his eye, "but let us place upon it terms he can possibly not meet. Tell him he must complete this monumental wall not in 3 seasons, but in 1, a single winter, and he must do it with no help from any man. The gods were delighted. This was the perfect solution. The builder would fail, their oaths would be technically void, and they would be free of his bargain. They presented these new, impossible terms to the builder. The builder considered this. The task was, indeed, impossible. But he made one seemingly minor counter-request. He would agree to the new deadline and the rule of no help from any man, but he asked that he be allowed the help of his stallion, Svaldafari. The gods deliberated. What harm could one horse do? Even a strong horse could not quarry, haul, and set stones for such a massive wall in a single winter. Loki, confident in his own cleverness, assured them it was perfectly safe. "It is still impossible," he insisted. "Let him have his horse." And so the bargain was struck. Sacred, binding oaths were sworn. If the builder finished the wall by the first day of summer, he would receive the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freyja. If even one stone was out of place, he would get nothing. The builders set to work, and the gods watched, their confidence soon turning to dread. The builder was a master, but his stallion, Svaldafari, was something else entirely. By night, the horse hauled impossibly massive stones from the mountains, his strength seeming to defy logic. By day, the builder, a craftsman of superhuman skill, set the stones in place. The wall grew at an alarming rate. Svaldafari was not just a horse, he was a magical beast, a creature of immense power, doing the work of a dozen giants. Winter wore on, and the wall grew higher. The gods' casual observations turned to nervous council meetings. With only 3 days left before the first day of summer, the wall was nearly complete. Only the great gateway was left to be built. The builder and Svaldafari were on schedule. Panic set in. Freyja was in tears. The sun and moon looked down with fear. The gods realized, to their horror, that they were about to lose their most precious treasures, all because of a bargain they never intended to honor. And in their panic, they did what they always did. They found someone to blame. Their eyes turned as one to the architect of their problem, Loki. "This is your fault, Loki. You advised us to take this bargain. You assured us he would fail." Odin was grim. "If you cannot find a way to make this builder fail, to undo the damage of your own clever advice, you will face a fate far worse than any giant." Loki was cornered. He was threatened with a terrible, painful end. And when Loki is cornered, his solutions become creative. He didn't have a plan to stop the builder, but he looked at the powerful stallion, Svaldafari, and a new, desperate idea began to form. The builder's strength was his craft, but the speed of the operation, the true miracle, was the horse. If the horse were to disappear, the work would stop.
Loki was a master of Seder, a shapeshifter of unparalleled skill. He could become a salmon, a fly, an old woman. He understood that to solve this problem, he couldn't use force. He had to use cunning. He had to target the one thing that was not bound by the builder's oath, the stallion's focus. That evening, as the builder prepared for his final night of work, Loki slipped away from the halls of Asgard. He went to the forest, to the edge of the quarry where Svaldilfari would soon be hauling the last massive stones for the gate. There, under the pale moonlight, Loki worked his deepest magic. He twisted his form, altering his very essence. He was no longer the lithe male god of mischief. In his place stood something new. A beautiful mare, sleek and wild, stood at the edge of the woods. This was not a mere illusion. Loki had become the mare in every essential way. The builder arrived with Svadilfari. The stallion sensed the presence in the woods before he saw it. Then the mare let out an inviting neigh. Svadilfari's head snapped up. For months, this magnificent creature had known nothing but work, hauling stone after stone. Now he saw this beautiful, captivating mare, seemingly calling to him from the safety of the dark woods. The builder tried to urge his stallion on. They were so close. The sun, the moon, and a goddess was his prize. But Svadilfari, for the first time, resisted. The mare neighed again, a sound that cut through the cold winter air. The stallion's primal instincts overwhelmed his training. He snapped the harness. He broke free from his master's control. The builder shouted, but it was useless. Svadilfari charged into the forest, chasing the mysterious mare. The builder was frantic. He ran after his horse, shouting its name, but the two horses were gone, vanished into the deep, dark woods. All night the builder searched. All night the mare led the stallion on a chase through the forest, deeper and deeper, far from the unfinished wall of Asgard. The sun, Sol, began her ascent into the sky, heralding the first day of summer. Her rays touched the high peaks of Asgard and illuminated the wall and the gaping, unfinished hole where the gateway was supposed to be. The deadline had passed. The bargain was broken. A furious, exhausted builder returned, without his horse and without his payment. He stood before the gods, his face a mask of rage. He had been tricked, he knew it, and in his fury, he dropped his disguise. The builder's form swelled. His features coarsened. His size grew monstrous. The gods gasped. This was no mere mortal mason. This was a Jotun, a giant, who had infiltrated their home and nearly stolen their most sacred treasures. In his rage, the giant threatened the gods. His true, violent nature revealed. The gods, having broken their own sacred oaths to the builder, now felt justified, but they were still in peril. And just at that moment, a sound of thunder echoed. Thor had returned. Taking in the scene, the giant raging, the gods in peril, Thor needed no explanation. Oaths were sacred, but a giant threatening his home was a simple matter. He lifted Mjolnir. The dispute was settled, swiftly and permanently. The builder would never threaten Asgard again. The gods were safe. The sun, the moon, and Freyja were secure. And Asgard had a magnificent wall, almost finished, which the gods completed themselves. But one question lingered in the air. Where was Loki?
Months passed. The gods had almost forgotten the incident, content in their newly secured fortress. Loki was a familiar, if chaotic, presence, and his periodic absences were not unusual. But when he finally did return, he was not alone. Loki walked into the great hall of Asgard, no longer in the form of a mare, but as himself, and trotting at his side, on 8 nimble legs, was a small gray foal. The gods fell silent, staring at the strange, multi-legged creature. It moved with an unnatural grace and speed. Loki, with an air of nonchalance that barely concealed his ordeal, explained. The night in the woods had resulted in consequences. He had been trapped in his mare form for months, and in time had bore a foal. This foal. This was Sleipnir, the slipper, or the gliding one. Despite the truly bizarre origins of the creature, the gods, especially Odin, recognized its quality. This was no ordinary horse. This was the child of a magical giant stallion and a god in disguise. It was a creature of two worlds, of chaos and of power. Loki, perhaps as an apology for the whole mess, or perhaps to regain favor, presented the foal to the Allfather. He gave Sleipnir to Odin. This act, born of desperation and trickery, had an astounding legacy. Sleipnir grew to be the greatest of all horses. His 8 legs were said to represent the 8 directions, allowing him to gallop not just over land, but through the air and even between the realms. Sleipnir became Odin's most prized possession, his faithful steed who would carry him into battles, on his journeys for wisdom, and in the end, would carry him to his final, fateful battle at Ragnarok. The horse was a symbol of speed, of shamanic journeying, and of the interconnectedness of the 9 realms. It was, in a strange way, one of Loki's greatest contributions to the Aesir. But what does this story tell us? It is far more than just a strange and amusing anecdote. It is a window into the very soul of Norse mythology. First, it reveals the complex nature of the Norse gods. They are not the perfect, infallible beings of other pantheons. They are powerful, yes, but they are also flawed. They are vain, they panic, and they are perfectly willing to break their own sacred oaths when cornered. They cheat a builder out of his payment and then feel righteous indignation when he, in turn, reveals his own deception. They are pragmatic, political, and deeply, recognizably imperfect. Second, it defines the character of Loki. This story is perhaps the ultimate example of his role in the cosmos. He is the liminal figure, the one who walks the boundaries. He is both Aesir and Jotun. He is a friend to the gods and their greatest adversary. And in this story, he transcends the boundary of gender itself. This is not just a simple shapeshift. He doesn't just pretend to be a mare, he becomes one, to the point of bearing a child. This act places him outside all categories. He is the mother of Odin's steed, just as he is the father of the 3 great monsters of Ragnarok, the wolf Fenrir, the Midgard serpent Jormungandr, and the goddess of death, Hel. Loki is the agent of chaos, but in Norse thought, chaos is not just destructive, it is also creative. Loki causes the crisis by suggesting the bargain, but he also solves the crisis with his trick. And in doing so, he creates something new and powerful. He is the catalyst for change, the unpredictable element that keeps the world from becoming static. This tale, recorded primarily in the Gylfaginning of the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson, has fascinated scholars for centuries. It's a story that defies simple moral judgment. There are no true heroes here. The gods are treacherous, the giant is deceptive, and Loki is, well, Loki. It's a story that reminds us that myth is not always about teaching simple lessons. It is about exploring the deep, complex, and often contradictory truths of existence. It explores the nature of oaths, the price of security, the tension between order and chaos, and the ways in which our cleverest plans can have the most unexpected consequences. The Great Wall of Asgard stood as a testament to the gods' power, but it was also a silent monument to a broken oath, a giant's rage, and the moment the God of Mischief sacrificed his form, his dignity, and his identity to save them all while creating the most magnificent horse the 9 realms would ever know. What are your thoughts on this strange and complex tale? What other stories from the 9 realms would you like us to explore?
Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into mythology, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Your support helps us continue to explore the greatest stories ever told. Thank you for joining us on Mythic Mundi.